I will be reading a letter that I wrote and mailed to the President of the United States in December of 2020. You may notice that I didn't address former President Donald Trump or current President Joe Biden by name at all in my letter, and opted for just addressing the reader as Mr. President. The reason for doing so is because, as I previously mentioned, the time that I sent the letter was in mid to late December of 2020. Despite the fact that I live fairly close to Washington, D.C., I wasn't sure when the letter would arrive or be read, as the inauguration was to happen on January 20th. I also did this because the election was still being disputed at the time, so I just didn't know who would read the letter. Before anybody mentions it, I know it is rather unlikely that the President of the United States personally reads and hears all the letters, emails, and phone calls he receives. I just left it ambiguous as to not sound foolish. I would also like to briefly mention that I still stand by almost everything shared in my letter, though not entirely. The general idea and the message remains the same. Also important to point out that I have found new information pertaining to my letter which centers around driving regulations and traffic stops. Not a lot of people are aware of this, but the Supreme Court of the United States already ruled that you do not need a driver's license to drive a car on public roadways or highways for non-commercial purposes, meaning that you only need a driver's license if you are engaged in commerce. For example, if you're a tractor-trailer driver, taxi driver, or if you do Uber or Lyft, then in that instance, you need a license. If you would like to learn more about this, information will be linked in the description of this video. The letter itself will also be in the description of the video if you would like to read it. Dear Mr. President, I am writing this letter to you today to address a major problem facing the United States currently. This issue in particular being unwarranted, unconstitutional, and unethical police traffic stops and driving regulations. These traffic stops are really out of control and are in desperate need of being reformed or abolished altogether. Firstly, you should not need a driver's license or insurance in order to drive any motor vehicle or car on a public road. Your car is your property. You paid for it with your own money. It is yours. The public road is a road that you help pay for through taxation, or in some instances owned in common, and ideally all roads should be privatized or held in common contractually. You should not require permission to use your own property on a road you helped fund. Getting a third party like the state involved in this matter is completely unnecessary and limits freedom and liberty which the United States was initially founded upon. I also believe that an age requirement necessary to drive should also be abolished. There has been documented proof that boys as young as 8 years old are able to drive competently and independently in countries like Saudi Arabia. I also believe that driving on a public road while under the influence of alcohol or other drugs should be completely legal. You might make a rebuttal saying that when you make it legal to drive while drunk or high, that you enable dangerous behavior and the roads would be less safe. But I personally believe that when you trade freedom for safety, you lose both. On that note, though, I almost think that legalizing drunk driving would make the roads safer. More people would be vigilant and alert while driving and would in turn actually make drunk driving less prevalent than it currently is. Another point I would like to make is certain drugs can actually enhance the user and make them a better driver. I also believe that traffic lights and stop signs on public roads should be recommendations only, not punishable by fines or imprisonment if exceeded. People aren't just going to go through red lights like crazy as you might think if we were to make them voluntary, but as I have mentioned previously, it would make people more vigilant. This is just to ensure that people aren't victimized over victimless crimes. For example, if no one is around or coming, going through a red light or a stop sign shouldn't be a big deal at all. This is a matter of common sense. If a state law enforcer sees you exceed these ridiculous expectations, then you will get a fine or worse. The vast majority of them don't care and throw out any and all context of the situation and just go by whatever is on the books. Speed limits should also be voluntary, and for the same reasons mentioned previously. Another aspect is that it is simply unethical to rob and cage people for not abiding by these arbitrary, subjective, and tyrannical laws and regulations. The private prison system in the United States profits immensely off incarcerating people for victimless crimes. The United States is supposed to be the land of the free, yet as of 2016 we house nearly 25% of the entire world's prisoners. Even worse, all of these rules and regulations are enforced by the American people, from the government extorting them to threats of violence. We did not all consent to the fruits of our labor being used in this manner. I would like to end this off by calling upon you, Mr. President. I believe that you are a reasonable man and level-headed enough to make the right decision in this situation. You are in a position of power to do something about this. I would suggest an executive order to pardon and free everyone charged with these traffic violations, and making everyone else immune from these crimes. I urge you to look back at the spirit of our founding fathers. the true American spirit of valuing freedom and liberty. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Joseph Francis. If you're wondering if I ever got a response back, I never did. Either one was never made, or I just never received it for whatever reason. But I'm going to guess the former is more likely. I've realized that the President of the United States has to oversee a nation of over 330 million people, and that it would be quite difficult to get his attention, especially with our current president showing signs that he may not be mentally competent. I've decided to focus my efforts on sharing my message with my local representatives at the county or state level. I've known people personally that have sent emails and letters to our state's congressional representatives and have received personal responses back. I hope you found this video informative. Thanks for watching, and may God be with you.